Oakland Cemetery in Atlanta, Georgia. Haunted after dusk #paranormal #haunting #haunted #creepy Chapter 1. The sun was setting over Atlanta, casting a golden hue over the city's skyline. In a dimly lit cafe, a group of 5 young adults huddled around a table, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of candlelight. There was Alex, the ringleader with a mischievous glint in his eyes; Sarah, the skeptic who always needed proof; Jake, the quiet one with a penchant for the supernatural; Mia, the adventurous spirit always up for a challenge; and Lily, the bookworm who loved a good ghost story. As the evening wore on and the coffee cups emptied, the conversation turned to local legends and haunted places. Alex, with a smirk, leaned forward. "Have any of you ever been to the historic Oakland Cemetery at night?" Jake shivered. "You mean the one established in 1852? I've heard it's haunted." Mia laughed. "Haunted? Come on, it's just a bunch of old graves." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "I've heard stories, especially about the Capturing the Spirit of Oakland Halloween tours. They say the spirits come alive." Lily, engrossed in a book, looked up. "There are tales of apparitions, unexplained events, and even poltergeist activities. It's said that the spirits are especially active after dark." Alex's smirk grew wider. "How about a dare? Let's spend the night at the cemetery. If it's just old graves, as Mia says, then we have nothing to worry about." The group exchanged nervous glances. The dare was enticing, but the idea of spending a night in a haunted cemetery was daunting. Jake hesitated. "I don't know, man. It sounds risky." Sarah, always the skeptic, scoffed. "It's just a cemetery. What's the worst that could happen?" Mia, not one to back down from a challenge, said, "I'm in." "Let's do it." Lily, curious about the tales she had read, nodded. "I'm up for it." Jake sighed. All right. I'm in too. But if anything weird happens, I'm out." With the dare accepted, the group set out for the historic Oakland Cemetery. As they approached the entrance, the atmosphere grew palpably eerie. The once golden hue of the sunset had given way to a deep blue, and a thick fog began to roll in, enveloping the gravestones in a ghostly shroud. The wrought iron gates of the cemetery loomed ahead, their intricate designs casting eerie shadows on the ground. The group hesitated for a moment, the weight of their decision sinking in. But with a deep breath, Alex pushed the gates open, and they creaked ominously. As they ventured deeper into the cemetery, the fog grew thicker, and the silhouettes of statues and mausoleums appeared and disappeared, playing tricks on their eyes. Every rustle of leaves, every distant hoot of an owl, sent shivers down their spines. After what felt like hours, they stumbled upon a grand mausoleum, its door slightly ajar. Curiosity piqued, they approached and peered inside. To their surprise, they found a homeless couple, wrapped in tattered blankets, their faces etched with lines of hardship. The man, with a grizzled beard and kind eyes, looked up. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Alex, taken aback, replied, We're here on a dare. We didn't mean to intrude." The woman, with silver hair and a gentle demeanor, smiled. "It's all right. This is our refuge. The spirits here are kind, especially Eleanor. She protects us." Lily, intrigued, asked, "Eleanor? Who is she?" The man sighed. "A spirit from the 1800s. She was known for her charitable work with the homeless. Even in death, she continues to watch over us." The group exchanged uneasy glances. The tales they had heard were beginning to feel all too real. As the night wore on, the group settled down near the mausoleum, the fog acting as a blanket, enveloping them in its cold embrace. Every sound, every shadow, felt amplified, and the weight of their decision to spend the night in the cemetery pressed heavily on their minds. Little did they know that this was just the beginning of a night that would test their courage, their beliefs, and their very sanity. Note: this chapter sets the stage for the unfolding events at the historic Oakland Cemetery, introducing the main characters, setting the eerie atmosphere, and hinting at the spirits that reside there. The narrative aims to build suspense and intrigue, leaving the reader eager to delve deeper into the mysteries of the cemetery. Chapter 2. Eleanor's watch. The fog grew denser as the night deepened, casting the cemetery in a silvery glow. The group, huddled together for warmth, listened intently as the homeless man, whom they learned was named Samuel, began to recount the tale of Eleanor. In the late 1800s, Eleanor was a beacon of hope in Atlanta, Samuel began, his voice soft and raspy. She was a wealthy heiress, but unlike many of her status, she had a heart of gold. She dedicated her life to helping the homeless, the downtrodden, the forgotten souls of the city. Sarah, ever the skeptic, raised an eyebrow. And how did she end up here, in the cemetery? Samuel sighed, his eyes distant. Tragedy, my dear. Eleanor was betrothed to a man named Thomas. But just days before their wedding, Thomas was killed in a tragic accident. Heartbroken, Eleanor withdrew from society. She would visit Thomas's grave every day, rain or shine, until one fateful night, she too met her end, right here in this very cemetery. The group exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of Samuel's words sinking in. Mia, trying to lighten the mood, joked, "So, Eleanor's spirit is here, looking for her lost love?" Samuel shook his head. "No, my dear. Eleanor's spirit remains here to protect those in need. Just as she did in life, she continues to watch over the homeless, the lost, the forgotten." As if on cue, a soft breeze rustled the leaves, and the group felt a sudden drop in temperature. From the corner of their eyes, they thought they saw a faint apparition, a woman in a long, flowing dress, her hair cascading down her back. But when they turned to look, there was nothing there. Lily, her voice trembling, whispered, "Was that Eleanor?" Samuel nodded. "She's always watching, always protecting." The homeless woman, Clara, chimed in, "Eleanor has saved us many times. Whenever danger lurks, she's there, guiding us, protecting us." Jake, intrigued, asks, "What kind of danger?" Clara shivered. "There are other spirits here, not all as kind as Eleanor. But she always keeps them at bay." The group, already on edge, felt a growing sense of unease. The tales of Eleanor's protective apparitions were becoming all too real. As the night wore on, the group began to experience more unexplained events. They heard soft whispers, felt cold spots, and saw fleeting shadows. But every time they felt threatened, they also felt a protective presence, as if someone was watching over them. Alex, trying to keep his composure, said, "This is getting too real. Maybe we should leave." But Sarah, ever the skeptic, scoffed, "Come on. It's just our minds playing tricks on us." Lily, her voice trembling, whispered, "I don't know, Sarah. I've never felt anything like this before." As dawn approached, the group, exhausted and on edge, decided to rest for a while. They found a secluded spot near a beautiful statue of an angel, which they later learned was Eleanor's grave. As they settled down, they heard soft singing, a lullaby from a bygone era. The voice was sweet and melodic, and the group felt a sense of calm wash over them. Samuel, with tears in his eyes, whispered, "That's Eleanor. She's singing for us, comforting us." The group, overcome with emotion, listened intently, letting the sweet melody soothe their frayed nerves. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, the singing faded, and the cemetery returned to its peaceful state. The group, their adventure over, made their way out, but not before leaving a bouquet of flowers on Eleanor's grave, a token of their gratitude for her protection. As they left the cemetery, they knew they would never forget their night at the Historic Oakland Cemetery, and the spirit of Eleanor, who continued to watch over those in need. Chapter 3. Nathaniel's wrath. The first rays of dawn had barely touched the horizon when the group, still reeling from their encounter with Eleanor's spirit, decided to explore further. The cemetery, bathed in the soft glow of morning, seemed peaceful, its dark secrets hidden beneath the veil of daylight. As they wandered, they stumbled upon a section of the cemetery that looked older, more decrepit. The gravestones here were worn, their inscriptions barely legible. The air felt heavier, the atmosphere more oppressive. Lily, ever the curious one, began reading the inscriptions, trying to piece together the stories of those buried here. "Look at this," she whispered, pointing to a particularly worn gravestone. Nathaniel Blackwood, 1820 to 1850. Taken too soon, his spirit remains. Jake, feeling uneasy, said, "Maybe we should leave this area." "It doesn't feel right." But Alex, ever the adventurer, scoffed, "Come on, it's just old graves. What's the worst that could happen?" As if in response, a cold wind blew, extinguishing the candles they had lit. The group, now plunged into darkness, felt a growing sense of dread. From the shadows, a voice whispered, "Why have you come here?" "This is my domain." The group, frozen in fear, tried to locate the source of the voice. But it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Sarah, trying to keep her composure, said, "Who are you? What do you want?" The voice, now louder, more menacing, replied, "I am Nathaniel. And you are trespassing on my territory." Samuel, recognizing the name, whispered, "Nathaniel Blackwood." He was a wealthy landowner in the 1800s. But he was also known for his cruelty, his ruthlessness. It's said he was murdered, his body dumped in the cemetery. The group, realizing the gravity of their situation, began to panic. But before they could react, they were hit by a wave of aggressive poltergeist activity. Gravestones shook, statues toppled, and the ground beneath them trembled. Mia, screaming, said, "We need to get out of here." But the exit was blocked by a wall of dark energy, preventing them from leaving. Nathaniel's voice, now filled with rage, boomed, "You dare to trespass on my territory? You will pay for your insolence." The group, desperate to escape, tried to find a way out. But every path they took led them deeper into the cemetery, further into Nathaniel's grasp. As they ran, they were hit by a barrage of paranormal activity. Apparitions appeared and disappeared, cold spots sent shivers down their spines, and unexplained noises echoed through the air. Lily, tears streaming down her face, whispered, "We need Eleanor. She's the only one who can protect us." But Eleanor's spirit was nowhere to be found. It was as if Nathaniel's dark energy had overpowered her, preventing her from intervening. The group, now separated, tried to regroup. But every time they got close, Nathaniel's energy would push them apart. Alex, realizing the gravity of their situation, said, "We need to stick together. It's our only chance." But as they tried to regroup, they were hit by another wave of poltergeist activity, more aggressive than before. The ground beneath them cracked, sending them tumbling into a pit. As they tried to climb out, they were met by Nathaniel's apparition, his eyes filled with rage. "You will pay for your insolence," he hissed. The group, realizing they were trapped, began to lose hope. But just when all seemed lost, a soft light appeared, illuminating the pit. It was Eleanor, her spirit glowing with a soft, ethereal light. With a wave of her hand, she dispelled Nathaniel's dark energy, freeing the group from his grasp. The group, exhausted and traumatized, made their way out of the cemetery, vowing never to return. But as they left, they couldn't shake the feeling that Nathaniel's spirit was still watching, waiting for his next victims. Chapter 4. The game begins. The fog had thickened to an almost impenetrable haze, and the once familiar landmarks of the historic Oakland Cemetery were now obscured. The group, still reeling from their encounter with Nathaniel, found themselves in a part of the cemetery they didn't recognize. The air was thick with tension, and every rustle, every distant whisper, seemed amplified. Sarah, her voice trembling, whispered, "We need to find a way out. We can't stay here." Jake, his face pale, nodded in agreement. "Every minute we spend here, we're in more danger." But as they tried to retrace their steps, they realized they were trapped. The paths that once led to the exit now twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the heart of the cemetery. Mia, trying to keep her composure, said, "It's like a maze. We're going in circles." Lily, her eyes wide with fear, whispered, "It's Nathaniel. He's doing this. He's trapping us here." As if on cue, a cold wind blew, and the group felt a sudden drop in temperature. From the shadows, they heard Nathaniel's voice, filled with malice. "You thought you could escape? The game has just begun." The group, realizing the gravity of their situation, began to panic. But just as they were about to lose hope, they saw a soft light in the distance. It was Eleanor, her spirit glowing with a soft, ethereal light. She beckoned to them, her voice soft and soothing. "Follow me. I'll guide you to safety." The group, desperate for any sign of hope, followed Eleanor as she led them through the maze-like paths of the cemetery. But as they ventured deeper, they realized that Nathaniel's manifestations were becoming more violent. Gravestones shook, statues toppled, and the ground beneath them trembled. Apparitions appeared and disappeared, and unexplained noises echoed through the air. Alex, his voice filled with fear, whispered, "We need to stick together. It's our only chance." But as they tried to regroup, they were hit by another wave of poltergeist activity. The ground beneath them cracked, sending them tumbling into a pit. As they tried to climb out, they were met by Nathaniel's apparition, his eyes filled with rage. "You thought you could escape? The game has just begun," he hissed. The group, realizing they were trapped, began to lose hope. But just when all seemed lost, Eleanor's spirit intervened. With a wave of her hand, she dispelled Nathaniel's dark energy, creating a protective barrier around the group. She turned to them, her eyes filled with determination. "You need to find the heart of the cemetery. It's the only way to break Nathaniel's curse." The group, realizing they had no other option, followed Eleanor as she led them deeper into the heart of the cemetery. But as they ventured further, they realized that the stakes were higher than ever. Nathaniel's manifestations became more violent, and the group found themselves facing a barrage of paranormal activity. Apparitions appeared and disappeared, cold spots sent shivers down their spines, and unexplained noises echoed through the air. But with Eleanor's guidance, they managed to navigate the maze-like paths of the cemetery, avoiding Nathaniel's traps and manifestations. As they neared the heart of the cemetery, they felt a sudden surge of energy. The air crackled with tension, and the group realized they were about to face their biggest challenge yet. Nathaniel's spirit, now more powerful than ever, appeared before them, his eyes filled with rage. "You think you can defeat me? You're mistaken," he hissed. The group, realizing they were in grave danger, braced themselves for the final showdown. But with Eleanor's guidance and their determination to escape, they managed to overcome Nathaniel's manifestations and break his curse. As dawn broke, the group, exhausted and traumatized, made their way out of the cemetery, vowing never to return. But as they left, they couldn't shake the feeling that Nathaniel's spirit was still watching, waiting for his next victims. Chapter 5. Crypt of Memories. The sun had barely begun its ascent when the group, desperate for a respite from the relentless manifestations of Nathaniel, stumbled upon an ancient crypt. Its entrance was adorned with ornate carvings, and the name, Blackwood, was etched into the stone above the door. The very name sent shivers down their spines, but the need for shelter outweighed their fear. Pushing the heavy door open, they were met with a rush of cold, stale air. The crypt was surprisingly spacious, with stone benches lining the walls and a large altar at the center. The walls were lined with niches, each holding an ornate urn or a faded photograph. Mia, her curiosity piqued, began to examine the photographs. "Look at these," she whispered, holding up a black and white image of a young woman in a flowing dress. "They must be from the 1800s. Lily, ever the historian, nodded in agreement. "These are tintypes. They were popular in the late 19th century. As the group examined the photographs, they began to piece together the stories of those buried in the crypt. There was a young soldier, his uniform adorned with medals, a mother and her child, their faces etched with sorrow, and a young couple, their hands intertwined, their eyes filled with love. But it was the photograph of a young woman that caught Sarah's attention. "This is Eleanor," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. The group gathered around, their eyes drawn to the image of the young woman. Her eyes, filled with determination, seemed to pierce through the photograph, as if she was trying to communicate with them. Jake, his voice trembling, whispered, "We need to contact her. She's our only hope." Lily, ever the skeptic, scoffed, "A seance? Really?" But Alex, realizing the gravity of their situation, nodded in agreement. "It's our only option. We need to know how to escape Nathaniel's wrath." With the decision made, the group gathered around the altar, their hands joined in a circle. They began to chant, their voices echoing through the crypt. As the minutes ticked by, the atmosphere grew heavy, and the group felt a sudden drop in temperature. The candles they had lit began to flicker, casting eerie shadows on the walls. And then, as if from nowhere, Eleanor's spirit appeared before them. Her form was translucent, her eyes filled with sadness. Sarah, her voice filled with awe, whispered, "Eleanor, we need your help. How do we escape Nathaniel's wrath?" Eleanor, her voice soft and soothing, replied, "You must find the heart of the cemetery. It's the only way to break Nathaniel's curse." The group, realizing the gravity of their situation, nodded in agreement. But as they prepared to leave the crypt, Eleanor's spirit faded, leaving them with a sense of foreboding. As they made their way out of the crypt, they couldn't shake the feeling that Nathaniel's spirit was still watching, waiting for his next victims. Chapter 6. Divided we fall. The crypt's cold, damp air weighed heavily on the group as they emerged, the morning sun doing little to dispel the chill that had settled in their bones. The vastness of the historic Oakland Cemetery stretched before them, its maze-like paths and looming mausoleums seeming more menacing than ever. "We need a plan," Alex declared, his voice echoing slightly in the stillness. Jake, rubbing his temples, suggested, "Maybe we should split up. Cover more ground. Find the heart of the cemetery faster." Sarah, ever the skeptic, scoffed, "Split up? In this haunted place? Are you out of your mind?" Lily, her voice trembling slightly, interjected, "Jake might be onto something. If we're together, Nathaniel can target us all at once. If we split up, it might be harder for him." Mia, her eyes darting around nervously, nodded in agreement. "I think it's worth a shot. We can't stay here. We're sitting ducks." And so, with heavy hearts and a sense of foreboding, the group decided to split up. Alex and Mia headed towards the older section of the cemetery, where the gravestones were worn and the paths overgrown. Sarah and Jake decided to explore the mausoleums, hoping to find clues within their cold, stone walls. Lily, ever the brave one, chose to venture into the heart of the cemetery alone, armed with nothing but a flashlight and her determination. As Alex and Mia made their way through the older section, they felt an oppressive energy surrounding them. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to move on their own. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew, extinguishing their torches. In the darkness, they heard whispers, voices from the past, recounting tales of sorrow and despair. The weight of the tragedies that had befallen those buried here pressed heavily on them, and they struggled to maintain their composure. Meanwhile, Sarah and Jake, as they explored the mausoleums, began to experience a different kind of paranormal activity. The heavy doors of the mausoleums slammed shut on their own, trapping them inside. Cold spots appeared out of nowhere, sending shivers down their spines. And then, as if from nowhere, apparitions appeared, their translucent forms floating before them, their eyes filled with sadness. Lily, as she ventured deeper into the heart of the cemetery, felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The paths twisted and turned, leading her further into the maze. Every rustle, every distant whisper, seemed amplified, and she felt as if she was being watched. And then, as she rounded a corner, she came face to face with Nathaniel's apparition. His eyes, filled with rage, bore into hers, and she felt a coldness like she had never felt before. As the hours ticked by, the group's situation grew more dire. Alex and Mia, lost in the older section, struggled to find their way out. Sarah and Jake, trapped in the mausoleums, tried desperately to escape. And Lily, face to face with Nathaniel, tried to summon the courage to confront him. But as dawn approached, the group realized that one of them was missing. Sarah, who had been with Jake in the mausoleums, was nowhere to be found. The group, their fear now mixed with desperation, began to search for her, calling out her name, hoping against hope that she was safe. But as they searched, they couldn't shake the feeling that Nathaniel's spirit was still watching, waiting for his next victims. Chapter 7. The heart of the cemetery. The sun, now high in the sky, cast long, eerie shadows across the historic Oakland Cemetery. The group, their numbers diminished by Sarah's mysterious disappearance, trudged on, their determination to find her only matched by their growing fear of Nathaniel's wrath. As they ventured deeper into the cemetery, they stumbled upon a section that looked even older and more decrepit than the rest. The gravestones here were moss-covered, their inscriptions faded with time. The air was thick with the weight of centuries, and every step they took seemed to echo with the whispers of the past. Lily, her historian instincts kicking in, began to examine the gravestones, trying to piece together the stories of those buried here. "This is the oldest part of the cemetery," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "These graves date back to the early 1800s. Jake, his eyes darting around nervously, said, "We need to be careful. This is Nathaniel's territory." But Alex, ever the adventurer, scoffed, "We can't let fear hold us back. We need to find Sarah." As they explored the heart of the cemetery, they began to learn about its history and the spirits that resided there. There was Abigail, a young woman who had died of a broken heart, Benjamin, a soldier who had perished in battle, and Elizabeth, a mother who had lost her child to illness. But it was the story of Nathaniel that caught their attention. As they pieced together the fragments of his life, they began to understand the depth of his rage. Nathaniel had been a wealthy landowner, known for his cruelty and ruthlessness. He had been betrayed by those closest to him, leading to his untimely death. And now, his spirit roamed the cemetery, seeking vengeance on anyone who dared to trespass on his territory. As the group delved deeper into Nathaniel's story, they began to experience his most aggressive display yet. The ground beneath them trembled, and the air grew cold. Apparitions appeared and disappeared, and unexplained noises echoed through the air. Mia, her voice trembling, whispered, "We need to stick together. It's our only chance." But as they tried to regroup, they were hit by another wave of poltergeist activity. The ground beneath them cracked, sending them tumbling into a pit. As they tried to climb out, they were met by Nathaniel's apparition, his eyes filled with rage. "You dare to trespass on my territory?" he hissed. The group, realizing they were trapped, began to lose hope. But just when all seemed lost, Eleanor's spirit intervened. With a wave of her hand, she dispelled Nathaniel's dark energy, creating a protective barrier around the group. She turned to them, her eyes filled with determination. "You need to find the heart of the cemetery. It's the only way to break Nathaniel's curse." The group, realizing they had no other option, followed Eleanor as she led them deeper into the heart of the cemetery. But as they ventured further, they realized that the stakes were higher than ever. Nathaniel's manifestations became more violent, and the group found themselves facing a barrage of paranormal activity. Apparitions appeared and disappeared, cold spots sent shivers down their spines, and unexplained noises echoed through the air. But with Eleanor's guidance and their determination to escape, they managed to overcome Nathaniel's manifestations and break his curse. As dawn broke, the group, exhausted and traumatized, made their way out of the cemetery, vowing never to return. But as they left, they couldn't shake the feeling that Nathaniel's spirit was still watching, waiting for his next victims. Chapter 8. Eleanor's sacrifice. The heart of the historic Oakland Cemetery was eerily silent, save for the distant rustling of leaves and the group's labored breathing. The weight of the past hung heavily in the air, and the group could feel the energy of the spirits that resided there. Suddenly, a cold wind blew, and the group felt a sudden drop in temperature. From the shadows, Nathaniel's spirit emerged, his eyes filled with rage. "You dare to challenge me?" he hissed. Eleanor, her form glowing with a soft, ethereal light, stepped forward, her eyes filled with determination. "Enough, Nathaniel. Leave these innocents alone." Nathaniel, his voice dripping with malice, replied, "Why should I? They trespassed on my territory. They will pay for their insolence." Eleanor, her voice filled with sadness, said, "It doesn't have to be this way. We can find peace." Nathaniel scoffed, "Peace? There is no peace for me. Not after what you did." The group, taken aback, exchanged puzzled glances. What was the connection between Eleanor and Nathaniel? Eleanor, her eyes filled with tears, whispered, "I never meant for it to end this way. I loved you." Nathaniel, his voice filled with pain, replied, "Love? You betrayed me. You left me to die." The group, realizing the gravity of the situation, began to piece together the fragments of Eleanor and Nathaniel's story. Eleanor had been Nathaniel's lover, but their love had been forbidden. In a fit of rage, Nathaniel had been betrayed and murdered, his body dumped in the cemetery. And now, his spirit roamed the cemetery, seeking vengeance on anyone who dared to trespass on his territory. Eleanor, her voice filled with sorrow, whispered, "I never wanted this. I wanted us to be together. But fate had other plans." Nathaniel, his eyes filled with rage, replied, "Fate, you made your choice. And now, you will pay for it." With that, Nathaniel's spirit lunged at Eleanor, his energy crackling with dark power. The group, realizing the danger, tried to intervene, but they were no match for Nathaniel's strength. Eleanor, realizing the gravity of the situation, made a split-second decision. With a wave of her hand, she channeled her energy, creating a protective barrier around the group. But the effort drained her, and she began to fade. Nathaniel, realizing he was weakened, retreated, his spirit disappearing into the shadows. The group, their hearts heavy with sorrow, gathered around Eleanor, her form now translucent. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. "You gave me a chance to make things right." With that, Eleanor's spirit faded, leaving the group alone in the heart of the cemetery. As dawn broke, the group, their spirits lifted by Eleanor's sacrifice, made their way out of the cemetery, vowing to honor her memory. But as they left, they couldn't shake the feeling that Nathaniel's spirit was still watching, waiting for his next victims. Chapter 9. Dawn approaches. The first hints of dawn painted the horizon with a soft, golden hue, casting the historic Oakland Cemetery in a surreal light. The group, their energy drained from the night's harrowing events, trudged on, their every step echoing with the weight of their ordeal. Eleanor's spirit, though weakened from her confrontation with Nathaniel, continued to guide them. Her form, now barely visible, floated ahead, her soft light illuminating the path. "We need to hurry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Nathaniel's power wanes as dawn approaches, but he will do everything in his power to stop you. Jake, his face pale from exhaustion, nodded in agreement. "We need to find an exit. We can't stay here." Lily, her historian instincts kicking in, said, "The cemetery has a main gate. It's our best chance." But as they made their way towards the gate, they realized that Nathaniel wasn't going to let them go without a fight. The ground beneath them trembled, and the air grew cold. Apparitions appeared and disappeared, and unexplained noises echoed through the air. Mia, her voice filled with fear, whispered, "We're running out of time." Alex, ever the optimist, replied, "We can do this. We just need to stick together." But as they neared the gate, they were met by Nathaniel's spirit, his eyes filled with rage. "You think you can escape?" he hissed. The group, realizing the gravity of their situation, braced themselves for the final showdown. But just as all seemed lost, Eleanor's spirit intervened. With a wave of her hand, she channeled her remaining energy, creating a protective barrier around the group. The effort drained her, and she began to fade. Nathaniel, realizing he was weakened, retreated, his spirit disappearing into the shadows. The group, their hearts heavy with sorrow, made their way to the gate, their every step echoing with the weight of their ordeal. As they emerged from the cemetery, the first rays of dawn painted the sky with a soft, golden hue. The weight of the past lifted, and they felt a sense of relief wash over them. But as they left, they couldn't shake the feeling that Nathaniel's spirit was still watching, waiting for his next victims. Chapter 10. The Escape. The first light of dawn bathed the historic Oakland Cemetery in a gentle glow, casting long shadows that danced with the morning breeze. The group, their clothes tattered and faces etched with exhaustion, stumbled out of the cemetery's main gate, the weight of their harrowing ordeal evident in their every step. The city of Atlanta, which had seemed so distant during their night of terror, now bustled with life. Cars honked, birds chirped, and the distant hum of the city provided a stark contrast to the eerie silence they had left behind. Mia, her voice trembling with relief, whispered, "We made it." Alex, wrapping an arm around her, replied, "We did. But we can never go back." Jake, his face pale from exhaustion, nodded in agreement. "That place, it's cursed. We were lucky to escape." Lily, ever the historian, said, "The cemetery has a long history, filled with tales of sorrow and despair. But it also has tales of love and sacrifice. We were fortunate to have Eleanor on our side." As the group made their way down the street, they were met by the homeless couple they had encountered earlier. Their faces, etched with worry, broke into smiles of relief when they saw the group. "We were so worried," the woman whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. "We thought we had lost you." The man, his eyes filled with tears, added, "Eleanor. She saved us. She protected us from Nathaniel's wrath." The group, realizing the depth of Eleanor's sacrifice, felt a renewed sense of gratitude. They had escaped the cemetery, but they would never forget the spirit who had saved them. As they made their way back to their homes, they vowed never to return to the historic Oakland Cemetery. The weight of the past was too heavy and the risk too great. But as they left, they couldn't shake the feeling that Eleanor's spirit was still watching over them, her gentle presence a reminder of the love and sacrifice that had saved them. The cemetery, once a place of fear and despair, returned to its peaceful state. The spirits that resided there, their stories now told, found solace in the knowledge that they would never be forgotten. And as the sun rose higher in the sky, the historic Oakland Cemetery, with its tales of love and sacrifice, stood as a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. We hope you have enjoyed our storytelling offering tonight. Please be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to be alerted of future weekly additions to our collections. Paranormal Untold Stories.